Hello again, welcome to Mozart Mondays with me, Michael Collins. I'm going to carry on speaking about the Mozart Clarinet Concerto, and today I'd like to talk a bit about the second movement, arguably one of the finest movements written for the clarinet, and probably one of Mozart's finest movements in general. I mean, it's a very famous movement. We all know the main theme from the movie Out of Africa. It's a glorious theme and perfectly suited for the clarinet. It's very simple. I think I spoke a lot about in the first movement about the singing quality of the clarinet, and here it really comes to the fore to demonstrate just how the clarinet can sing like a human voice. Here's the opening few bars of the second movement. You may ask, what on earth goes on in someone's mind, you know, the performer's mind, when they're playing such a beautiful melody? I can sort of reveal a few secrets about that, again, after years of performing this piece in public. I suppose there's always this moment before I start playing the movement to get myself in a state of calm, because you know, you don't want to start the movement with the heartbeat racing and the adrenaline pumping. You need an absolute sort of calmness in oneself to approach this movement. Too slow, and the movement it has this rather sort of feeling in six, which I think is a big mistake. Too fast, and later on in the movement, some of the faster notes can sound very agitated. So to strike the right tempo for this movement is one of the most difficult and challenging aspects about playing the piece. So before I play the movement, will just take a second or two just to sing the melody in my head, so I know what I'm aiming for, because I spend most of my time now playing this piece and directing the orchestra. It makes life a little easier because you don't really have to transmit your feelings or your wishes, if you like, to a conductor. As I'm doing both, I can sort of create that atmosphere with just very simple body movements, even the upbeat to the start of the movement, with the way I breathe can show the orchestra the tempo that I want to set, a bit like this. So I just show just a gentle swaying of the clarinet and an upbeat in the tempo that I want to play is enough to show the orchestra the direction that I'm going in, because the orchestra are playing these moving quavers, dee da 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 dee da dee da da da, and they have to sound seamlessly and effortlessly in character, you know, supporting the solo line, which is not an easy thing to do, because it's very easy to treat the orchestral part as an accompaniment. In my view, it's not. It's very much a supporting role to the solo line, and the more support a soloist can get from an orchestra, the more believable and the more let's say even a longer line, which I'm always after, can be produced. Because that's part of the problem. This melody at the beginning is just in 2 bars, phrases. Here we go. two-bar phrase, and we don't really want that to come across. What we want is this very long phrase from the first note to the very last. That can be helped enormously by the orchestra supporting the clarinet underneath with these moving quavers. I find that's very important. So if we get that from the very beginning, the movement 99% of the time will take on a happy feel to it. So we have this opening phrase, which is then answered exactly by the orchestra. In obviously more glorious, richer sounds. He marks forte, or, well, we can assume that he marks it forte because the manuscript, as I mentioned in the first movement, there's only a fragment of the first movement which exists. So a lot of these dynamics we use our musical initiative. So it makes sense that the first phrase that we play on the clarinet is played sort of dolce piano and then answered in more lush mezzo forte forte style of playing. So it's just this constant, like a very slow tennis match, toing and froing. We have the clarinet line, then answered by the orchestra, and then answered again by the next entry of the clarinet, which is such a beautiful phrase, such a beautiful phrase. So each two-bar phrases, they build up, build up, build up to then, like a flower opening, blossoming, to top of that phrase and down again, only to be taken up yet again by exactly the same material in the orchestra. He then moves on and develops these two phrases into a more elaborate style and uses the clarinet again in a more well, I suppose a more varied way, and using the clarinet's range from the top to the bottom. As I said, the manuscript doesn't exist, so we can only assume which parts of this movement, in fact all three movements, are to be played an octave lower on the basset clarinet. And very much in this next section we can play a lot of the phrases an octave lower, so you get this real sonority of the basset clarinet playing often in the same register and unison with the cello and the bassoons. So you get this very rich, creamy sort of style, if you like, which gives the whole movement this more autumnal feel about it. So here's a couple of examples where you can play this next developing phrase an octave lower on the basset clarinet, and then I'll play it as it would be on the more regular A clarinet. And on the clarinet it would be continue, because this is so clear that he intended it for the basset clarinet. Just listen to this phrase. Which would be on the clarinet, and on the basset clarinet. So you're able to take a phrase right the way through, right the way down to the bottom of the instrument, to this resounding bottom note of the bassett clarinet, which I think are pretty amazing. No other instrument that I know can produce this kind of sonority. And just a small thing to mention, that the bassett clarinet, anyway, the regular clarinet even, has a very large range compared to other wind instruments. I mean, we have, our lowest note and very high note. It's a large range. And so the bassett clarinet is even larger. Here's the lowest note. And the top note, well, not even the top, but a high note. So you can see we have a very big range on the bassett clarinet. Mozart doesn't go right up there, thankfully, but he does use the full range of the bassett clarinet, as the phrase I just played demonstrated. And now he is all the way down so we can play the full arpeggio in its glory. So there we are, these wonderful moments which lead up to a cadenza, a moment when the soloist can improvise in a very stylish way, maybe not overdone, but just tastefully done to take us back into the recapitulation. It's probably a good moment to just talk about the very opening again and see how close it is to the clarinet quintet slow movement. He obviously adored the key of A major, and with the clarinet quintet and this concerto, the two movements are very similar. In fact, so similar that if I'm playing both works, often around the same time, when I walk out to play the beginning, the clarinet concerto slow movement, I have to think, oh, this is the concerto, not the quintet. Here's the opening of the clarinet quintet. And once more, the clarinet concerto. So, as you can hear, they're very similar, very similar. So it can be quite confusing at times, and particularly so when it comes to the cadenza. And quite often, most clarinetists, and me included, when it comes to the cadenza, we use the little cadenza from the clarinet quintet to take us back into the recapitulation, which is this. And it's often played in a more sort of distant way, often pianissimo or even 3Ps. So in the concert hall, it's like treading on eggshells, so fragile when it returns. It's not marked, and I doubt even if the score existed, would we see pianissimo at this point. It's left to the performer, and it's left to the magic of the concert hall, the magic of the moment, and atmosphere. and that has to be judged just at that particular moment in a performance. It can be incredibly dangerous if you go too soft, then some of the notes are not going to speak or come out with a bump even. So it's a nerve-wracking moment, but one of the most magical and breathtaking moments of any piece that I know, and in music in general. So there we are. There's differences between the Mozart Clarinet Quintet and the Concerto, or should I say similarities with the opening phrase. They are very similar. And the final blast, if you like, of the second movement is one of reflection, and again, it's timeless. And I often find in the performance, it's one of those moments you can't count or feel there's a real pulse going on. You just have to judge each phrase for what it is, and each phrase as a magic moment, and when time stands still. So this is the very end.